Hi everyone and welcome to the new unit on Report Challenge for Kids News. So this unit will take us the next 4 weeks through to the end of term 3 and it lines up with the digital technologies component. So this element fits in the same area as our coding unit from last term but focuses on slightly different content. So our design brief. You need to produce an informative article for publication on the website kidsnews.com.au. And you've got two options here. The general theme is one social to rule them all. In other words, one social media platform that you think is the greatest. But you might be able to come up with another headline that you think is more effective than that. The purpose of the article is to evaluate different social media sites and mount an argument as to which one is the greatest. The design criteria essentially gives you the details around who you're writing for, the amount you need to write, making sure that the data that you use is appropriate. And we'll spend some time in this unit looking at how do you manipulate data using spreadsheets, where do you source data from, and if you're going to include images, what's Creative Commons and how does that licensing work in this context? So the 4 stages of our design process: identifying and defining. Essentially, we're asking you here to work out who you're writing for. What can you assume that the reader knows, and what do you assume the reader does not know? What sort of things would be really helpful for you to include in your article? So really thinking about your audience. Secondly, then in the research and planning phase, we're going to look at which social media platforms do you want to focus on. So you might choose 2 or 3 and really delve into a bit of depth as to which one of those 2 or 3 is going to be the greatest of them. And to make that judgment, to make that argument, you need to back it up with data. So you might think about gathering data about how many active users there are, what sort of age group they come from, where they're spread around the world, how many times a day do they engage in that media platform. So there's a range of types of data that you might be able to gather to help bolster your argument around which one's the best. There's 3 options here and your teachers will guide you as to which one you should be doing, but we'll take a look at the core one. Essentially, you're asked to decide on 3 platforms that you need to compare. So it might be Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. You need to get some data on the total users, how many active users there are, and that's quite different to total. So active users mean they're engaging in the platform on a regular basis compared to inactive users, which are those people who signed up at some point but probably don't use it very much. We're going to work in a spreadsheet to create a table with all that data sitting in it, and we're going to create some graphs around that as well. You might think about what are the strengths and weaknesses of each platform. That might be a useful way to present your data to your audience. And finally, we're also going to ask the question, in terms of contribution to society, how has this platform made a difference? Has it been for good or bad? What impact has this platform had? So that will vary depending on the platform you're looking at. When we get to the producing and implementing stage, you have been provided already with a template to create your report in, a spreadsheet to gather your data in with some sample data in there to work with, and also a working file. And I'm suggesting to you that the working file is the place where you can, when you're doing research, just copy and paste things that are useful. So as you're doing a bit of a broad search around, rather than trying to remember all the URLs you went to, you just simply copy and paste them and dump them in that working file so that you can come back to them later on. If there's any good images and those sorts of things that you run into, so long as they're available to you under Creative Commons, copy and paste them in there, and also copy and paste the link as to where you got it from. But we'll talk more to that in the unit itself. And finally then, once you've actually produced your article, we're going to make sure that we've provided evidence of where we got our data from so that it can be verified. The same for the images. And then also we're going to run our reports through a bit of software to see that it's original, to see that you haven't copied the text from somewhere else. And that's quite normal. When you start submitting assignments in senior high school and certainly at TAFE and university, all of those organisations will ask you to run your submissions through some software first to see whether or not you've referenced correctly, whether or not you've made it your own work rather than copying somebody else's. To support us, we've reached out to the editor of Kids News. Now, Kids News fits into the News Corp organisation. News Corp is a really big business. By big, I mean there's 150 different titles, including Kids News, just in Australia alone that fall into the News Corp bucket. It includes newspapers like The Australian, the Daily Telegraph, and so on, right around the country. In addition to that, they've got news organisations like the New York Times or the Times in the UK, the Wall Street Journal, and so on. So there's a whole range of news elements to News Corp. But on top of that, they also look after Fox in America. They have the 20th Century Fox brand for creating movies. They have book publishing like HarperCollins, which you will have heard of, or at least if you look on your bookshelf, you'll see a range of HarperCollins books, as well as TV, both on pay TV and free-to-air broadcasted. So it's a really big organisation. By big, back in 2010, we're talking about a turnover of $32 billion globally. Rupert Murdoch's a name you might have heard of, and he has been for a decade now the chair of that organisation. So the editor of Kids News is Kamal, and she has provided for us some information specifically about this task. So we reached out to her as a school, and she's come back to us. To give you some background with her, she's spent 25 years as a journalist in all different areas of news. So if you search for her, you will find articles in all sorts of fields, in all different publications within the News Corp organisation. Given that she's worked for that period and has done a really good job of that, she was only recently promoted to be the editor of Kids News, and the editor is, if you like, the head of that business part. So this is what she's provided to us. Now, I'm not going to read it all to you, and I'll give you a moment to scan it, but I've taken this information and included it in a separate document for you so you can take a look at it at a later date when you start writing your article. What she's providing is a range of tips and hints as to what makes a good article. So when we finish this project, we'll submit some of our best articles to her that she might consider publishing. And she's also agreed to send us some prizes for some of the more interesting, effective and impressive pieces that are produced. So if you're interested in that sort of a field, if writing is really your passion, this is a direct connection to an editor within the News Corp organisation, and we'll reach out to her to provide your work. To support you in this activity, you'll find in the 7 Tech class page a topic called One Social to Rule Them All. Her feedback is sitting there, and a range of files have been provided to you which will support you in creating this article. The one that I want to particularly look at is the folio, and the folio provides for you the structure, provides you all the bits that we've just talked through, and so as you scroll through that document, you'll find all of the information you need and some additional components. Finally, then, your report submission is also uploaded to that post in Google Classroom, and this is where you're going to actually write your final report. So you can change the headline if you like, and it's giving you some boxes to be able to then write your article, include images and captions and so on. But you are, of course, welcome to add rows to this if you would like to write more or less. You can edit that. It's a template to get you started. So look, I hope this unit helps you out both with your writing, but just as importantly, helps you understand that the use of data is very subjective. And over the course of the last few years, we've heard the phrase fake news coming up. We'll take a look at how we can manipulate data that is accurate, but we can present certain parts of it to support an argument that we want to put forward and perhaps ignore other parts of data. So data bias is a really significant issue. And as you engage in the broader world, and particularly media, you need to look at things with a critical eye to see, well, how authentic is this data and what's the position that this author is trying to present. So we'll work through that as this unit progresses. Thanks so much.